The five-star Manhattan hotel lobby erupted in chaos. A Chinese millionaire was shouting in rapid Mandarin, waving official documents, growing increasingly frustrated. Two managers rushed over. A receptionist called someone who knew a little Chinese. He barely managed ni hao. Guests recorded on their phones. The situation was spiraling out of control. Then, from the cafeteria, a waitress named Emily put down her tray and walked to the counter. Nobody noticed her. She was just another invisible employee. But when she looked the millionaire in the eyes and spoke in flawless Mandarin, the entire lobby went silent. The man blinked in shock. "You speak Chinese?" he asked, stunned. Everyone stared. How does a Mexican-American waitress speak perfect Mandarin? But the most disturbing part wasn't the language. It was the way the millionaire looked at her, as if he recognized her voice from somewhere deep in his memory. What Emily didn't know. This man was connected to the darkest chapter of her past. The family who fired her unjustly in China. The boy whose grandfather she saved. And now he'd found her. This is the story of how one moment of courage transformed an invisible waitress into someone who could never be ignored again. What city are you watching this video from, and what time is it? By the way, if you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video. The clock showed 9:17 a.m. at the Grandeur Hotel, a five-star establishment with contemporary architecture and elegant glass panels located in Manhattan's Upper East Side, New York City. It was a normal morning. Impeccably dressed receptionists typed with precision. Uniformed bellhops rushed with luggage, and the aroma of freshly ground coffee mixed with the soft echo of background piano music. But everything changed when the revolving doors let in a man in a dark suit accompanied by two assistants with expressionless faces. His presence didn't shout, but it imposed. It was evident he wasn't just any guest. He walked to the counter with firm steps, took out his passport, and began speaking in rapid, closed Mandarin. Excuse me, said the receptionist, raising an eyebrow, not knowing how to react. The man repeated the phrase, this time with a more impatient tone. He raised a document with official stamps and pointed to something on his cell phone screen. Nothing helped. In less than 3 minutes, the usual lobby atmosphere turned into a whirlwind of confusion. A manager came running down from the offices. They called another employee who knew a little Chinese. But he didn't get past ni hao. One of the assistants tried to mediate, but spoke only Cantonese, and the millionaire seemed to get even more frustrated. Some guests began to observe discreetly. Others recorded with their phones. From the cafeteria, Emily was drying a stainless steel tray with automatic movements. She had been working there for 6 months, and from day one had learned not to intervene in what didn't concern her. In that hotel, cleaning and kitchen staff were only functional decoration, invisible. Nobody asked them anything, nobody listened to them, but something in that man's gaze seemed familiar to her. Not his face or his clothes, but his frustration, that mixture of helplessness and pride, that feeling of being surrounded by voices but completely alone. Then, as if an internal spring activated, Emily left the tray on the bar, discreetly unbuttoned the top button of her blouse, and walked toward the reception. Nobody noticed her until she was next to the millionaire, and when she looked him straight in the eyes, she spoke for the first time, Nin Hao. Ni shu yao bonjour ma? Hello, do you need help? The silence was immediate. The man blinked. Then he looked at her carefully, as if evaluating something more than her language, as if he recognized her, though not by sight. Ni hui shuo zhongwen? You speak Chinese? He asked with slight surprise. Emily nodded softly, and for the first time all morning, the lobby chaos dissolved into a murmur of disbelief. Nobody understood how a Mexican-American waitress spoke Chinese with such fluency. Not even she seemed completely comfortable doing it. But the most disturbing thing wasn't that. What was truly strange was the way the millionaire looked at her, as if it weren't the first time he had heard her voice. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Not the receptionists, not the managers, not even the man's assistants. It was as if time had frozen in that bubble of astonishment that Emily had just broken with a simple phrase. The millionaire nodded slowly. Then he spoke in a more relaxed tone, explaining there was a problem with his reservation. He said he tried to explain the situation since he arrived, but nobody understood him. There was an error with his room, Emily told the hotel staff. He reserved a specific suite and it's already occupied. He comes from Shanghai with a very tight schedule. He cannot be relocated to another place and much less ignored. What room number? Asked the manager. The 1502, Emily responded. The manager typed on the computer and his face tensed, reading the screen. That room has already been assigned to another guest, a Texan who arrived last night. There's no reservation appearing under this gentleman's name. Emily looked at the millionaire. He took from his briefcase a paper with official stamps and a printed code. He extended it toward her. Emily took it and read it silently with a strange sensation in her chest. It's a reservation receipt with confirmation number. He made it from China through a private agency. She translated everything with precision, but inside something began to stir. It wasn't just the language, it was the cadence, the pauses, even the man's gaze. Something about him seemed disturbingly familiar, as if it weren't the first time she heard him speak. One of the hotel assistants, with a distrustful gesture, broke the silence. And you, how do you speak Chinese like that? Emily stood still for an instant. I lived abroad for a time, she responded without looking at anyone. In China? Yes, near Shenzhen, was all she said. And nobody insisted because just at that moment the millionaire turned toward her with a slight smile, the first since he had entered the hotel. Then, with a slow and clear voice, he asked, What's your name? Emily felt a knot in her throat. Emily Chen. The man nodded slowly, as if confirming something he hadn't said aloud. Thank you, Emily. You've helped me more than you know. He didn't say it with condescension. He said it like someone looking at someone they haven't seen in a long time, like someone guarding an intact, though incomplete, memory. And while the manager walked away to resolve the error, Emily returned to her place in the cafeteria with the tray in hand, but her gaze lost. She didn't understand why that man unsettled her so much. She only knew that something deep inside her had awakened, and that from that moment on, nothing would be the same. The following hours passed with a silent uneasiness in the atmosphere. Although officially everything returned to normal at the hotel, there was something in the air that didn't dissipate. Employees talked in low voices, some with mockery, others with genuine curiosity. Did you hear? The waitress speaks Chinese. Is she adopted? She doesn't look Chinese, but what if she worked as a spy or something? Emily heard them without reacting. She continued cleaning tables, serving coffees, picking up crumpled napkins as always. But something in her movements had changed. Every gesture was more tense, every glance more evasive. From her corner in the cafeteria, she saw the millionaire coming and going with his assistants, now clearly more relaxed. They had already accommodated him in another special suite. A more expensive one, they said, and the manager didn't stop watching him, almost as if fearing something would go wrong. But he occasionally turned his head toward the dining room, looking for her. Emily knew it. She felt his gaze before raising her eyes, and each time their eyes crossed, an ancient pressure rose through her chest, like a memory not quite remembered. At the end of the shift, while the other employees left laughing or talking about their weekends, Emily stayed seated in the kitchen in front of a half-finished cup of tea. She was alone, and that calmed her, until she heard footsteps. It was him. The millionaire crossed the door with the same sober elegance as before. He brought no bodyguards or assistants, just himself and a small white envelope in his hand. "Excuse me for looking for you like this," he said in awkward but clear English. "I wanted to give you this." Emily looked at him with distrust. It wasn't money, it was a card. She took it carefully. Reading it, her heart skipped a beat. It was an invitation, a private event that same night in a hotel ballroom. A gathering of businessmen and political figures from the Asian circle in New York. Personal invitation. She frowned. And why would I want to go to an event like that? The millionaire observed her for a few seconds before responding. Because there are people who need to hear you. And you need to speak. Emily felt her chest tighten. She wanted to respond, but didn't. She limited herself to looking at the card once more, and then at him. He bowed slightly with an expression that wasn't arrogant or condescending. It was close, as if he knew her, as if he owed her something that hadn't yet been said. And he left. Emily stayed there in the empty kitchen with the invitation trembling between her fingers. She didn't know if she wanted to go, but she did know something. That man knew more about her than he had said, and that scared her more than any language. The Sakura Ballroom of the Grandeur Hotel was a space reserved for special occasions, with paper lanterns imported from Japan, thick carpets, golden columns, and staff watching every corner. That night it transformed into a bubble of luxury and elegant silences. Emily didn't want to be there. The dress she wore wasn't hers. Jessica, another waitress, lent it to her, and although her makeup was discreet, she felt everyone would look at her as an intruder. She walked with unsure steps down the hallway, with the invitation card pressed between her fingers. When she arrived at the ballroom entrance, a guard stopped her, checked the envelope, frowned, looked at her face, and without saying a word allowed her to enter. Inside, everything seemed unreal. Men in suits exchanged cards in perfect English or Mandarin, women in designer dresses toasted with crystal glasses. In a corner, discreetly seated, was him, the millionaire. He saw her enter and nodded, as if he had been waiting for her. Emily didn't understand what she was doing there. She didn't fit, and yet, she couldn't leave. "I'm not interested in being introduced to anyone," Emily told the millionaire when he approached minutes later. "I just want to know why you invited me." He responded calmly, "Because your story also matters, and this world needs to hear it." Emily looked at him with skepticism. "Do you know what my story is?" He didn't respond, but he didn't deny it either. Minutes passed, and to her surprise, nobody treated her badly. Some even smiled at her, believing she was the millionaire's interpreter. Others greeted her with courtesy. Emily slowly began to relax. For the first time in a long time, she felt something like respect in an environment where she had always been invisible. When she was invited to say a few words as the young woman who facilitated the honorable guest's arrival, everything seemed to close with ironic perfection. The hotel manager, who hours before had ignored her, now presented her with a forced smile to the businessmen. Behind, the receptionists looked at her surprised. Even embarrassed, Emily took the microphone. Her hands trembled. She was going to speak. Finally, she was going to tell a part of her truth. "Good evening. My name is Emily Chen and..." But she couldn't finish the phrase. An elegant woman with a firm voice interrupted from the back of the ballroom. "Excuse me, did anyone verify who she really is?" The room went silent. The woman advanced among those present, showing a tense gesture. She took out a phone and read aloud. "Emily Chen, no higher education, doesn't appear on any official list of interpreters or certified assistants in Chinese language. She worked as a domestic employee in Hong Kong until 3 years ago, according to immigration records." The revelation fell like a bucket of cold water. "And this is the person representing the hotel to our international guests?" asked the woman, looking directly at the manager. Nobody responded. Emily said nothing. Her breathing accelerated. She could feel the gazes fixed on her back, some of surprise, others of judgment, others of silent mockery. The manager lowered his head. "It's been a misunderstanding," he said in a low voice. "I'm sorry." And without waiting for another word, he gently took away the microphone. Emily descended from the stage without looking at anyone. She walked toward the exit, clenching her fists. She didn't cry, not in front of them. But something inside her broke that night. What she believed was the beginning of recognition was actually her most public humiliation. And as she left the ballroom through the back door, the only thing she could hear was someone's murmur saying, "In the end, she was just a waitress who got lucky." They didn't know how wrong they were. The next morning, the hotel seemed like another place. Colder, more hostile, not because of the weather, which remained dry and hot like all August in New York City, but because of the looks. Looks that avoided, that judged, that whispered with poor disguise. When Emily passed through the hallways, she wore her usual uniform again, cleaned tables again, served coffees again, but nothing was the same anymore. Nobody spoke to her directly about what happened the night before, but everyone knew. Even the laundry lady, who barely spoke English, looked at her with a mixture of pity and distance. Jessica, her closest companion, was the only one who approached her in the kitchen. Are you okay? She asked without beating around the bush. Emily nodded in silence. She didn't trust her voice. What they did to you was unfair. That woman, the one who exposed you, had no right. She was right, Emily responded with her gaze lost on the floor. I'm nobody important. I just worked cleaning houses in Hong Kong. I learned the language on the street, at the supermarket, talking with the children of the families where I cleaned. I never studied, never got certified. Jessica looked at her not knowing what to say. And yet you did what nobody here could do, she finally responded. That's worth more than a diploma hanging on the wall. But Emily didn't respond. That afternoon she stayed longer at the hotel, organizing the pantry. She did it out of habit, but also to avoid going out. She didn't want to run into the manager, didn't want to see the millionaire, didn't want to see anyone, until she heard a familiar voice behind her. Can I talk to you? It was him. Emily turned slowly without stopping, pressing a box of napkins between her hands. You don't have to apologize, she said, before he said anything. I put myself in that place. I brought it on myself. It wasn't fair, the millionaire responded with a low voice. I didn't invite you to be exposed. I invited you because I saw in you something that isn't taught in any institute. Emily looked at him tiredly. What did you see? He took time to respond, and when he did, it wasn't with clear words, but with a question. Do you remember the Zhang family? Emily felt a flip in her stomach. Her breathing stopped for a second. How do you know that name? Because I was there. Not as owner, not as boss. I was something else. And you did something for me that nobody else did. Even though you didn't see me. Even though you don't know it. Emily stepped back. Who are you really? He observed her with a mixture of compassion and gravity. I'm not who you think, but you're not just a waitress either. And without saying more, he left down the hallway. Emily was alone again, but something had changed. That name, Zhang, she hadn't heard it in years, and only someone who knew her life in Asia could have mentioned it. For the first time since her return to America, she understood that her past wasn't buried. It was just waiting for the moment to come out, and that moment was near. That night, Emily didn't sleep. She couldn't. The name Zhang wasn't just a memory. It was a wound. One she had learned to cover with routine, with silence, and with hard work. But now it was bleeding again. For years she had avoided looking back. Her stay in Asia wasn't a chapter of pride, although she had learned a language, a culture, and a form of resistance. There she lived things she didn't share with anyone, not even with Jessica. At 4 a.m., she left her rented room in Queens and walked aimlessly, without a watch. She just walked as if her steps sought to release the weight of that question. Who was that man, and what did he really know about her? The next day, as soon as she arrived at the hotel, she was called to the manager's office. She expected a sanction, a dismissal, but to her surprise, the person waiting for her was the millionaire. Only him. We're going out, he said without beating around the bush. I want to show you something. Emily hesitated, but something inside her pushed her to follow him. They got into a black SUV with tinted windows, crossed avenues, circled parks, entered industrial zones, and finally left the city. 2 hours later, they arrived at an unexpected place. A small white brick house with a wooden gate and neglected garden at the foot of a hill. Emily said nothing, but her eyes began to fill with tears. She recognized that place. It can't be, she whispered. How? You lived here, said the millionaire softly. You worked here 6 years ago as a live-in employee. You took care of a sick lady and her grandson. Emily pressed her lips. She didn't want to cry. You were nobody to that family, he continued. You were the Latina maid, invisible. But the day the grandfather got sick and nobody helped him, you carried him in your arms to the clinic. You saved his life. Emily lowered her gaze. I did it because there was nobody else. Because I couldn't let him die. And then they fired you for invading spaces that didn't correspond to you, right? Emily nodded in silence. That was her last experience in China. An unjust exit, without explanations. Just the contempt of those who couldn't stand that the maid had acted with more dignity than the house owners themselves. I was that grandson. Emily? Said the millionaire. She looked at him incredulously. I was a lost teenager. angry with everything. I didn't even look you in the eyes. But I saw what you did for my grandfather. I saw how you carried him, how you cried in the waiting room without anyone knowing. I kept your face in my memory, and when I saw you in that hotel speaking to me in my language, I knew it was you." Emily took a step back. The air was missing. "It can't be. I owe you much more than a room," he said, approaching with respect. "I owe you the life of the only person who took care of me in my adolescence. And now I want to give you something back." He opened the house door. Inside it was restored. New furniture, equipped kitchen, everything clean, warm, ready to be inhabited. "This house is yours now. It's not charity. It's justice." Emily fell to her knees, not because of the house, not because of the gesture, but because for the first time someone had not only seen her, they had remembered her. Emily didn't return to the hotel that day. She stayed in the house, not the house they had given her, but the house that had marked her. She walked through every corner as if walking inside a previous version of herself. That lonely young woman who washed floors in silence, who slept in a room without windows, who learned Chinese out of necessity, not aspiration. In the kitchen, she could still remember the screams. In the patio, the tears she shed in silence. But there were also the small moments. The boy who watched her from the stairs. The grandfather who greeted her every morning with a bow that nobody else saw. And now that boy was the man who had returned that past, not as a wound, but as an affirmation of value. The next day, Emily appeared at the hotel as if nothing had happened. Impeccable uniform, hair pulled back, firm gaze. Employees observed her with strangeness, some with discomfort, others with curiosity. But nobody dared to speak to her. Only the manager called her to his office. "Emily, I didn't know that," he began to say, but she interrupted him with a serene voice. "You don't need to say anything. You already said everything when you took away the microphone." The man lowered his gaze, visibly uncomfortable. "The company has received a note from the Chinese consulate," he continued. "They mention your name. They say Mr. Zhang, one of the main investors of the group, has personally requested that you be considered for the hotel's international relations area." Emily frowned. "International relations, me. You speak 3 languages. You know Chinese culture from the inside, and now, well, now everyone knows who you are." Emily thought for a few seconds, then asked, "And if I don't accept?" "You're within your right, but it would be a real opportunity to change your life, with contract benefits, another salary, another position." Emily didn't respond immediately. She appreciated it. Yes. But something inside her still doubted. That night it was Zhang who looked for her in the hotel cafeteria. He went without escorts, without formalities. "Did the house bother you?" he asked cautiously. Emily shook her head. "No, but I don't know if I can accept all this. I don't want them to see me as a story to tell, like the poor girl who was rescued by a grateful rich man." Zhang looked at her deeply. "You're not here because I gave it to you. You're here because you made it possible. When nobody was looking, when nobody was paying you to do it." There was silence. "And if they silence me again?" she asked in a low voice. "Then you'll have more tools not to allow it." Emily closed her eyes for a moment, then breathed deeply. "Okay, I accept, but not for the position or the salary, for something deeper, the certainty that she had finally stopped being invisible." That same week, her story began to circulate on social media. Not as a scandal, but as an example, a gesture, a lesson. But Emily avoided the headlines. She didn't want fame. She just wanted to walk through the hotel hallways, knowing that each step was no longer just another shadow. It was a presence, a voice, a living story. 3 weeks have passed. The Grandeur Hotel is no longer the same. Or perhaps Emily no longer sees it with the same eyes. Now she arrives early but doesn't enter through the kitchen. She crosses the lobby as part of the International Attention Executive Team. She wears a sober suit, her badge with her name, Emily Chen, and a title that before seemed impossible. Cultural Liaison Coordinator. She doesn't boast, doesn't give orders, didn't change her way of speaking or her way of looking at others. She just walks with a new posture, one that comes from within, not from arrogance, from dignity. The first day in her new position, she passed in front of the cafeteria. She saw Jessica washing cups and winked at her. "Will you make me one with a double shot of espresso?" she said with half a smile. "And will you pay me with your new salary, or are you going to owe me like before?" Jessica responded amused. Both laughed. Because although everything had changed, some essential things hadn't. Zhang returned to China, but before leaving he left a letter sealed with red ink. Not a contract, not a check, a letter. Emily read it alone, sitting in the house that was now hers. "It doesn't matter how many ballrooms you fill with applause, Emily. What you did for my grandfather, you did without an audience, and that's worth more. This house is your refuge, but your story shouldn't stay inside. Keep speaking, not just in Chinese, in all the languages your life has learned. The language of silence, of courage, of dignity. Some are born to shine, others to light fires in the darkness." Emily closed the letter with moist eyes, not from nostalgia, from gratitude. Finally, someone had listened to her without her having to shout. Today, when she crosses the lobby, some employees lower their gaze when they see her. Not from shame, from respect. Others smile at her, even those who used to mock. And when she passes by the elevator's large mirror, she no longer sees just a waitress with an uncertain past. She sees a woman who resisted, who spoke when nobody else did, who carried others and also her own story, and who now, without changing who she is, has changed what the world sees. Because sometimes the most extraordinary thing isn't being recognized, it's never being ignored again.